Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, Between the Books and Me. It's your boy Lazarus, coming to you with an unusual tag. I normally don't do author tags, but I am actually a writer. I have written several books, all of them pretty much shit. So I'm coming to you guys. It was an author tube tag, something I normally don't do. But I saw this over on Dane Reed's channel. I will put a link down in the description, and let's get straight to it. Number 1, what is your current story? Currently, I am working on a book that is called The Masks of the Laswazi, and it's a epic fantasy, because that's normally what I write. I write nothing but fantasy. And I've written a few urban fantasy-ish, but mostly it's like epic fantasy. And this is a combination of African, Native American, and Irish mythologies, brought into a world based in a jungle and a savanna setting. That's pretty much the gist of it. And there you go. Number 2, spark of inspiration. Do your ideas begin with character, plot, world building, or something else? Something else. It really can be anything. There is no one thing that it always starts with. It's kind of like a collection of ideas, and eventually some of them will fall together. I'm like, oh, there's the story. Sometimes it's just like a character. I've had one character that's been bobbing around in my head for a very long time, but I've never found a story that fit her background or her personality or her just in general. And there's actually a few characters like that. They just kind of bob around in my head, but they never find a home. There's also settings. There's a setting I want to use, but I've never been able to think of a story to go there or anything else. There's also just weird ideas. One of the first things I ever but I have a journal where I keep my ideas. One of the first things I wrote in it, I think, was time traveling outhouse, which I have used. Number 3, brainstorm. How do you piece story together? I just told you. I have a bunch of ideas. I let them pop around my head, I write them down, and eventually something will happen that will trigger several of those ideas to come together. I'm there's the story. And there you go. Keep or toss. How do you decide to keep or toss ideas? So I never toss out ideas, per se. What I do is sometimes I remove them from a story, and I just save them for later. But I never okay, this is a horrible idea, be gone with it. Even though some of them are really weird ideas that probably I'll never use, but I still keep them around just in case something clicks together. Do I, number 5, original idea. How much of your original idea is left by the end of a project? Depends on the project. For example, the current story I'm working on, the mask story, the magic system has stayed the same, and the Laswazi, which are basically table gods, have stayed the same. The world, the characters, everything else has changed. Even the practice of worship has changed drastically. And then there's other stories where, I wrote this one book when I was in my early 20s that was really bad, but is actually a good idea. I kind of slowly am working on... I work on several projects at once because I'm really big and I multitask a lot, and it's just kind of the way my brain functions. One of the things I'm working on is based on one of the second books, and it was it's called The Oasis. It was about magical animals and people living in American desert, because I grew up in the desert, and it kind of sucked. And then some other ideas came on later on, about poaching, and then a circus, and then I was oh, there's actually a really good story here if I can tell it. So sometimes the original idea stays the same, but it can be anywhere from 10 to 90% difference. Who knows? I mean 90% that's kept, 10% kept, 90% kept. It depends. 6, hide or share. Do you share your book ideas with your friends? No, not necessarily. I will share it with my mom almost always. or my dad. One of my best friend I'll share ideas with. And then my writing group, if I have a writing group at a time. Currently, I don't. I generally don't last very long in writing groups. 2 reasons. Sometimes people just want to hear praise about their own stuff, and then the other one is they don't like me. I know, you're asking, someone doesn't like you, how could that be? You're so nice. And I am nice. But I'm a man of strong opinions, and I was a member of a literary and writing group, who I managed to really make angry the very first day, and then they kind of spent most of the time disliking me or ignoring me, and never giving me any writing advice, because I have very strong opinions on The Great Gatsby, which is the first book we discussed, so bad start. And then my last writing group just fell apart. The other people weren't, I felt, as serious as I was. A lot of people missed the meetings. Then there was some other drama, and I don't know. Hopefully I find another writing group that works for me soon. The next one. Dream. Have any of your book ideas come from dreams or nightmares? Story ideas, book ideas. No, I don't think I've ever had a story idea that came from a nightmare or a dream, but I have had, like, world-building stuff come from dreams or nightmares. I know there's been a few creatures that have come from some of my nightmares. Let's see. Number 8, Doppelganger. Have you ever had an idea for a story, but then seen the similar premise in a book, TV show, or movie, or something else? Vaguely, because it's kind of like this. There are a lot of books that have similar premises, Magical Detective being one of them. Like, there's one book somewhere where, this is before the Dresden Files, but it was about a wizard living in New York solving crimes. Somewhere I have that book. So it's a similar, like, premise. Wizard solves crimes. Wizard detective, magical girl, helps government agency. You see that one a lot. So it depends, stuff like that. Yeah, have I ever had an idea that was like remarkably similar? Like, oh my god, that's exactly what I was thinking. No, that's never happened. 9. Big screen inspirations. Have you been influenced by movies or shows to like pop a scene in your head or something? Yes and no. Like a scene, no. But I've been watching a movie where, like, I get a really good book idea. In fact, the series I want to write next after the one I'm working on was directly inspired by a movie that I'm not actually a big fan of, but I was watching it in theaters, and I was like, why has no one ever done this in fantasy? And so I was like, I can do this in fantasy. So I'm going to. It's a top secret, though, because I only have a few. I have, like, one character. I have the map done, because I get a lot of ideas from maps. In fact, I'll show you this right now. I keep this book. Show you how old this book is. I've had this book a long ass time. But I get, like, ideas for maps. I want to show one that's not. But these are, like, some of my first maps I ever drew. So I keep books of those around. And this is actually the one right now that I'm working on for the Masks book. This was part of the inspiration for that. I'll just toss that over there. Maps are a big and important thing to me. I should have said that earlier about inspiration, but I didn't. Now let's see, I think we're down to 1. Yeah, nostalgia. What's your oldest first story idea you remember coming up with and writing down? Now sit right back and I'll tell you a tale of something horrible. I've mentioned my first book and how bad it was. It was just monstrously horrible. It's not the first thing I ever wrote. It's not the first novel I ever planned. That would be, like 3 years earlier, I think. I would have been in 8th grade when I tried to write my first novel. Now, this is, okay, the premise. The premise was that the world was created by several magical orbs, and those orbs, after the world was created, was placed in a jade tower that reached up into basically space. It was so tall that no human could climb it and live all the way up there. And so it would have taken like, it was supposed to take like hundreds of years to actually climb. Because that's how big and magical and powerful it was. The story idea is that a demon from hell, from like hell, not from like another hell, so it doesn't really make sense, from hell, climbed up the tower and tried to steal the orbs, but she got into a fight with the guardian and the orbs fell off the tower and they kind of like scattered onto the earth. And then, oh man, something happened. So this demon only steals one orb, and she goes down and she like takes over a kingdom or some shit, and a king, I don't know how it happened, but a king saved like an albino deer or something from a trap, and then the deer repaid the king by giving him one of the orbs, because it makes sense. And then the king has a kid, and then the demon attacks the king in the kingdom, and this bird guy takes the prince and the orb, because the prince is born and he's a baby, and the orb, and flies away and raises him somewhere else. And then stuff happens, and I don't remember how. Like, there was, like, I didn't get very far in it, but then what happens is that he gets a big, giant magical sword, like an anime sword, because I was really in, like, Dragon Ball Z, and at the time, I think, what was it? Rune Master or something? I can't remember. There's dudes with big swords, and so he had a huge-ass sword, and it starts, like, after the initial introduction, it's about the prince with his magical orb and a magical sword. He puts the orb in the sword, and he enters a fighting tournament for some prize. I don't remember what the prize was, but it was just like straight anime, written like anime in books. Like it was bad. So there's that. It was called the 7 Orbs, even though there ended up being more than 7. I never actually changed the name, because I was like, oh, we're gonna make one for each element, and then we'll make ones for the combined elements, like Earth. There's like 5, then there's light and darkness, and then there's the mind, and there's all that bullshit. And it just got big, but it's called the 7 Orbs, and because I didn't change it. But that was my first story day. I was probably like, so I was in 8th grade, so I've been like, what, 13? Somewhere around there, like 13, I think. 13, maybe 14. I don't know. But a long time ago. Long time ago. Before that, I did write a short story that actually makes no sense. And it was like only a few pages. I was probably like 8 when I wrote it. And it was about a wizard who kidnaps a prince in a blizzard and makes him eat chicken gizzards. And I think the wizard is defeated and turned into a lizard at the very end. So, oh, how times have changed, and now the poor get fat. And the music's gonna hit you when the bitch gets back. And with that, adieu. I will see you guys next time. Bye.